Next up, this is me cheating, but this is Lair by James Herbert and Killer Crabs by Chikai Smith. They're both getting this particular entry because they are both sequels to animal attack books that both these authors wrote before. So Night of the Living Crabs and, of course, James Herbert's The Rats. Now, what I think is interesting about this is I actually think both of these sequels better than the originals. I think Lair is so much better than Rats. It removes a lot of the stuff that I didn't like about James Herbert's Rats, which is mainly a lot of like xenophobia in there and some like iffy descriptions of other races. I just Rats just has like a few little things that just like leave a bad taste in your mouth, where Lair is very much just focused on the rats, and there are so many very interesting like scenarios about what they do with these rats, how they incorporate the rats into a very new environment, where this time they are attacking a a nature reserve that is like outside of London, and it's great. It's so good. The action set pieces are brilliant. I liked all the characters a lot better than the original Rats, and I just think Lair is absolutely a blast. And then Killer Crabs. Killer Crabs is and Light of the Living Crabs are definitely like both of them are like lower on the totem pole of books than than James Herbert's books, but I still do enjoy them nonetheless. And Killer Crabs is a great book because it's like super short. It's like 100, and I don't even think it caps like 150 pages. Like, and it's just like great crab related action, and like, you know, everything happens like super quick because you no longer have to explain and go like slowly incorporate the rats. It's just like, nope, bang 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 bang, killer crabs, killer crabs, killer crabs. I don't know how to call them rats before, but whatever, they're crabs. And there's like these giant battles between the military and the crabs are like eviscerating people, and it's so much fun, so ridiculous. And I absolutely adored both of these books. Super fun animal attack books, but yeah, they're definitely both trashy books. Next up, number 7, Kong, King of Skull Island. Now, this is a book that I think is a really interesting piece of art in that it is trying to talk about and flesh out one of the biggest problems with the original King Kong, and that is because of the Islanders. So the Islanders in the original King Kong are like very racist depictions. They do not hold up today. They're very pulp, very much like stereotypical, like this is what pulp tribes look like in any pulp book of the era or pulp movie of the era, and it definitely dates like it dates pretty poorly in that 1933 film, which other than that is pretty much like perfect, so it stands out. And this was kind of written with the idea of trying to flesh out those people and make an actual culture with it, and they do that while also introducing like a lead up to the original King Kong, because it's kind of like a prequel and a sequel. You learn a lot more about Kong and how he kind of grew up. A lot of the elements that would end up in Kong Skull Island, the more recent King Kong movie, there's a lot of elements here. Like, there is this new type of dinosaur that's introduced that has like these really cool looking giant, he's like got long arms, but he's a big old predator man, and they like fight, and that's really cool. And it kills his like family, and that's what happens with the skull crawlers in the new Kong. But regardless, I just think there's a lot of elements that kind of got taken from this and developed even further into other King Kong media. Also, there's a bunch of really, really gorgeous artwork in this. It is not a comic book, but it is a book that like every few pages has like this amazing 2-page spread of like this beautiful artwork on it. So it is a really compelling, really interesting a story in what it's trying to do. Does it nail all of it? I don't know. I don't know if what they try to do with the Islanders is like works super well for me. but is at least compelling and is at least interesting. All the King Kong stuff, though, is awesome. Like, all the action set pieces are great. All of these, introducing these other Saurian villains for Kong to fight is super fun. And yeah, I think this was a great read, a really enjoyable read. Quick read too, like it's not very long, and I think that's one of the key elements to making a good trashy book is, keep that length down. So yeah, definitely recommend that one. Next up, Night Warriors by Graham Masterton. My very first Graham Masterton book on, oh man, this was pretty trashy, but like very, very fun. This is like a dark fantasy book where it's basically like these guys have to become the Dream Warriors from Nightmare on Elm Street to like fight this like demon. There are some iffy parts in this. I mean, this is like Graham Masterton. This is written in the 80s, 87 to be precise. There were a few slurs used in this that I was like a bit iffy, but also when I thought about it, they might have been trying to say something about the character and not the writer. Like, when there's dated stuff in a book, it's always like very much trying to decipher that for yourself, but just be aware. But for the most part, this is just a blast of a book. I really like the characters. I found them really compelling and really interesting, and the action set pieces they get into are super fun. There is an animal attacks elements to this where like there is some sexual assault that happens in this book that is very scary and like horrifically written, but it's like but after this demon assaults people, they birth these like gross looking like tentacle eel demons that like are so creepy and like do terrible damage and kill people. And one of there's like a scene in which two police officers try to deal with this like birth of all these eels, and it's one of the funniest things I've ever read because like the eel, let's just say it goes up like a pant leg, and it is extremely funny what happens. I had a great time with this. It's one of those books that are like definitely got some nerd shit in it where it's like, here's the powers you have in the dreams. And I'm kind of into people introducing me to a world with like power levels and like, oh, this guy can do this. That's his power. This other guy can only do this. And you're like, yeah, okay, this is stupid, but I'm down for the stupidity of this. It's part of a series, so I will be looking forward to reading more of this series next year. Next up, this one is really surprising. This is Return of the Wolfman by Jeff Rovin. This book, if you're trying to find a physical copy, good luck. That's very hard to find, but it is all on archive.org. This is a fascinating piece of art because this is a book about the Universal Monsters. So this is a sequel. This is a horror sequel. A very like straight up like this is a horror book that is a sequel to the movie Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, in which everything that happens in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is canon to this horror book. And it works super well. And Jeff Rovin does the impossible, which is he extrapolates things that are laid down in a comedy film and incorporates that into a horror book that uses all of the tropes and all of the ideas and all the creatures from Universal horror films. And it weaves it all together in a very compelling, interesting way with great characters, and the action in this is crazily good. There are some like genuinely creepy scenes in this. You get the Wolfman fighting Frankenstein, this monster, I know, and Dracula, and all of the good stuff that you want, and it's just great. I had a great time with this. Definitely recommend reading this if you're at all into Universal Monster movies. Was one surprise after another, and I had such a good time with this one. So I think just the sheer impossibility of making a great horror book from a amazingly silly, fun comedy film is just outstanding. So yeah, highest recommendation for this one. Next up, we're getting into the top 4, The Haunted Forest Tour, which is by Jeff Strand and James A. Moore. This book is just like so crazy when it gets down to it, and has like all these different monsters and action and crazy stuff that happens. I just had a great time with this. So the basic premise of this one is there is a magical forest that just sprouts out of the ground. And what happens is, once they kind of cordoned off this forest, they don't have people go in it because there's like all kinds of monsters and creatures in here. So what do they do to this forest? They Jurassic Park the bitch. Somebody sets up like a tour of the forest through these tram systems. So basically, like, you get into this trams and you kind of go through this spooky haunted woods, and it has every conceivable creature you could think of, like, are populating these woods. And it, of course, something goes wrong. Of course. And it's just all these people trying to fight off every conceivable creature you can imagine. It's glorious. It is absolutely insane in elements. I had a great time with this, and I can't wait to read more James A. Moore and Jeff Strand books, because I had such a good time with it. And it just goes for it. It's just basically like, you know what? It's Halloween night. Bam, bam, bam. The monsters are out to play. And there's some horrifying scenes that happen in this. There are some hilarious scenes that happens in this. There's all kinds of action, all kinds of horror stuff that happens, and I was just loving it. I just ate it up, every second of it. Mwah! Super, super good. Number 3, this is a pulp series that I read the middle of, and I had a great time. This is The Witching of Dracula by Robert Laurie, and it is part of a series that is called, I believe it's the Return of Dracula series, and they're just these series of pulp books that have Dracula, and like there's like a guy in a wheelchair who has a psychic, has a friend who's like psychic and stuff like that. There's a bunch of like, it's a pulp story, so like you have like all of the stereotypes of pulp. It almost feels like Dracula is set into like this old Hanna-Barbera like crime fighting team, because there's like this like the guy who's like the muscle, and is like the professor who's the brains, and then they have a cat lady who can psychically talk to Dracula, and it's so ridiculous, but it's so fun. And they are going up against Elizabeth Bathory, who comes back from the dead, and they have to all team up to fight her. And it is really, really fun, really silly stuff going on. It's like pure pulp in every sense of the word. I had a great time with it. Couldn't recommend it more. I keep trying to find other entries into this series, and I really hope I get lucky and find some more, because, yeah, this was such a hoot and so weird and off the walls. And I love the idea of, like, basically like a Hanna-Barbera show where it's like, we need to call Dracula to save us. It's just so much fun. So much fun. So, yeah, definitely recommend that if you ever find one of these in the wild. It's one of those things where you're like, this feels like it's written for children, but you like, there's like cigarette ads in the middle, and I'm like, okay, I love it. I love it. Number 2, this is Stephen King's The Tommyknockers. Now, there are all kinds of Stephen King books out there. There are bad Stephen King books, like the Running Man. I don't like Firestarter that much. Things like that. And then there are wonderful, amazing Stephen King books that are just super expansive and some of the best stuff I've ever read. And then there's a bunch of stuff in the middle, which is like, what is this? What's going on here? This is okay. This is good. This is all wobbly, wibbly, wobbly. And there is no book that better represents that than The Tommyknockers. The Tommyknockers is a book that has stuck with me, and it is a wild book, especially near the end. But it is a book that has some merit and some interesting things to it. But it's also like, it's super bogged down with like very stereotypical King problems. Like if you don't like knowing what a town is like, then you can't read the Tommyknockers. You know everything about the town this place is set in. You know everything about the mailman. You know everything about all of them. And it's the main character of this book is so unlikable. He is not a good man. Which, by the way, I don't think means that a book can't be great if you don't have a likable protagonist. I mean, I read horror. A lot of people are not very likable. But it's this guy who is fully alcoholic. Like, he is not even functioning alcoholic through half of this. Like, he is very deeply trapped within his addiction. And he is a man who we never learn why, but he once, when he was drunk, he shot his wife. She lived, but he shot his wife. And it gets brought up a lot, but you never know why. You never know the story about what happened and why the hell he shot his wife. You never learn it. So this is this guy who is like this, he's like this poet, he does a lot of poetry, and he basically has like this mental breakdown while he's doing poetry. So he goes where his friend lives to like talk with his friend and hide out with his friend. Turns out his friend has found aliens, and aliens are slowly taking over the town. And this guy who for whatever reason is just not affected by the psychic aliens, because he's got like I believe he's got like a plate in his head. It's some kind of like medical condition, so he can't be as affected by the aliens' taint. So everyone around him is like changing and like, you know, warping, and everything is going all kind of crazy because they're becoming aliens. And he just keeps getting drunk and drunker and drunker until the end of the book. Basically, he has to save the world. So it's this guy who's like this kind of piece of shit who's like trapped in his addictions, and he has to do the right thing and save the world. And he has to save the world from wild things, because like the aliens just have this weird way with technology. Like, there is a shootout with an evil like soda can machine. Like, it gets wild in this book. Like, it's very bizarre. There's like exploding toasters. There's everything that's all nuts. So it's like maximum levels of like Stephen King bizarre nature with like an actual compelling narrative at the center about a man who's just trapped in his addiction, and like every time he tries to do better, he just keeps messing it up, and it's just like a really compelling character to follow, even though you definitely don't like him. And it's just a book that just stuck with me. It's like this little worm that just keeps on popping up. I keep thinking about it, and this is one of the first books I read of the year, so I'm really kind of amazed with the staying power. But it is very like, it's very trashy. It's a very trashy book, but it's a compelling one. It's a compelling one. It's not good, but I really like it. I don't know what that means, but that's my final view. And the number one best piece of trash that I read in 2022 is Predator South China Sea. I almost feel bad putting this on here. One, because it is impossible to find now. Like, you have to spend lots of money to find it. Hopefully someone just managed to stumble upon it. And three, it's one of those books where I'm like, do I really consider this trash? Like, where does it fall in my brain? And this is, for the most part, it's just a really great action story. But the twist is, this is written by Jeff Vandermeer. This is written by Jeff Vandermeer before Jeff Vandermeer wrote Annihilation. So what you get is a tale that incorporates a lot of elements that you would see Jeff Vandermeer explore in Annihilation and the rest of the Southern Reach trilogy, but in this Predator story. So there is this basically, like, there is in the South China Sea, there's this island that you can go on it and you can have like a hunting paradise, and it's like all these scumbags and rich people who like go to this island to hunt exotic animals that are like kept in by the person who owns the island and his private military force, and it's like this private hunting reserve for rich people. And all of a sudden, the Predator shows up, and this Predator is like the most deadly Predator I've ever seen. He eliminates so many people. Like, honest to God, I'm pretty sure the Predator kills like over 200 people in this book, because he like it obliterates an entire like standing army. It is so good and so intense and wild, and the action is so well written. And at one point, he scratches, like at one point one of the people who was like hunting him gets a scratch from the predator and gets infected with a weird virus. And so what happens to that character is very much what happens to people in Annihilation when they start to disassociate and start becoming something different. So it's this amazing story where when you finish it, I just wanted to start reading it again. Like, I honestly was tempted to just go back and read the whole thing again. The chapters, super short chapters. There's a bunch of chapters, but they're all super short. And the character work is fascinating. It's fascinating what Jeff Vandermeer is doing with some of these characters. How he's trying to talk about characters who are very much, again, people who are not likable, but have a lot of interesting, compelling elements to them. So, yeah, this is a book that's like half is a misnomer. It's like 80% the best action I've ever read. Like, as far as like just how you write a story, like some of the best action in a novel that I've ever read. Super compelling, super intense. I was like, whoa, I can't believe that happened. Whoa, that's amazing. Oh my goodness. And then 20% is like this deep, weird elements of things that you would find in later Jeff Vandermeer works, like the disassociating with reality. And there's even like the main area for the Predator is called Base X, right? And everything in Annihilation is called the Area X. And it seems like he was working through a lot of these ideas that he had for Annihilation. A lot of the building blocks were first explored in a movie tie-in book in a way that's super well written, super compelling. And yeah, this is just a great book. It was trash, but I gave it 5 stars. I really, really liked that book. So yeah, these are just some celebrations of some of the trashiest books that I read this year. What did you read this year that was trashy? Do you like trash? Do you hate trash? Do you agree with my picks? Do you hate some of my picks? Please let me know, and I hope you guys have a great day. Apologies for the length. Goodbye.